My question is, do you, Sam, think that entrepreneurs are born, or do you think they're made? And what traits set a successful entrepreneur apart from those who aren't so successful? But I really want to get to this question of the person.
Okay. So I'm going to answer that I think it's both. And the reason why I think that you have to obviously have a level of knowledge and the ability to learn, and that probably comes from your genetics, but it's really what you do with that that makes you an entrepreneur, and how the entrepreneurial environment shapes you. So me personally, how did I get involved in entrepreneurship? Because I actually started out from the Navy. I went to the Naval Academy of the United States, which people would not think would be very entrepreneurial, although we did have a saying in the Navy that it was a system designed by geniuses to be run by idiots, and I think that is important when you are building a company to think about. And then when I went to AIG, what I found with AIG is it's actually a big corporation, but it is very entrepreneurial. And I found myself right out of the Navy moving to Budapest because nobody knew anything about, this was right after the wall fell, nobody knew anything about Budapest, and certainly nobody knew about privatization of Social Security. And so AIG was very entrepreneurial in recognizing this was an opportunity to make money, and privatization of Social Security was following the Milton Friedman model from the University of Chicago. And so the way I kind of evolved as an entrepreneur was to move from a very disciplined profession, which is the Navy, and then I started getting the bug for entrepreneurialism and the freedom of, and then I went to a bank, and that was like the opposite. That was even less entrepreneurial than the Navy, sorry, to all those bankers out there. And that's when I really recognized that there was an opportunity to be entrepreneurial. So, so how do you become entrepreneurial? I think it's partly because maybe it's in your genetics, but it's also partly because, at least in my case, you start to get frustrated with not being able to do things in the corporate world. And also you get frustrated that there's not a direct reward between what you accomplish in a big corporation and what you personally can accomplish. So, I'm sure everybody else has their own story for how they evolved to become entrepreneurs, but I do believe in order to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to really depend on the environment that's around you. You have to have a supportive family, you have to have a supportive friends, a supportive network, in my case a very good partner, and so that's something that you're not born with, that's something that you have to develop as you proceed through your regular career, and then you make your move to the entrepreneurial world.
Okay, thank you. Devin, same question, and could you also add in this role that Sam alluded to of risk-taking and the role that plays in either attracting or dissuading somebody from wanting to become an entrepreneur?
Well, entrepreneur, I started as an entrepreneur when I was about 4. I stole a bunch of books from my parents' library, and I took my red wagon around, and my mom found me about 1.5 miles away, and I sold most of the first editions that they had. But I come from a family of entrepreneurs, and so I think to a certain extent there is a lot of culture that does it, that creates entrepreneurs. But that said, it's a lot like a sport where if you don't practice, you don't get any better at it. So you could be 6 foot, you could be 2 meters tall, or 2.5 meters tall, and think you're going to be a great basketball player, but if you've never picked up a basketball, you're not going to be in the NBA. And it's very similar, I think, with being an entrepreneur. If you don't practice at it, if you don't work your entrepreneurial muscles, they will atrophy. And I think cultures contribute to that. We were just talking about this earlier, that in Singapore, for instance, it's really difficult to fail. you know, the bankruptcy laws are extremely severe here, unlike they are in the Anglo-Saxon world. And I think that inhibits a lot of entrepreneurship. So consequently, you'll see a lot of expatriate entrepreneurs because we can leave. You know, if we fail, if our business goes bankrupt, our passport's not taken, we don't, you know, we're allowed to vote in our home country. And that doesn't happen for Singaporean entrepreneurs that fail. And you'll see that a lot of entrepreneurs that are very successful in the United States have been in bankruptcy 3, 4, or 5 times. And you know, I think that sort of culture, that ability to go out and do that and to know, oh, you're going to fail, but there's a fresh start behind it, and you're going to get better at it. And I think a lot of people too, you know, when you're in school, I was always running some sort of cupcake sale, or at one point I was the largest seller of Maxell's tapes in the state of Connecticut. And so everybody was ripping their, you know, that was in the day when you play an album and you put it on your mixtape. And, you know, I was selling 1,000 tapes a week in New Haven, Connecticut. And, you know, these are, and I had practice, so you had practice doing these things. And then CDs came in and just totally crushed that. So, you know, so you move on to the next thing, and I think that's something that's really important about being an entrepreneur. The other thing I wanted to piggyback on that you talked about being in the Navy and how it's not very entrepreneurial. It's very important, I think, that you learn how to do business, because being an entrepreneur is not about the idea. I mean, you could have the greatest idea ever, and we know that, you know, everything important in the last 500 years was invented in either Russia or China, but they couldn't commercialize these things. They couldn't get them to market. They couldn't make them sustainable. And, you know, as an entrepreneur, there's thousands of people that have had the idea that you have. And unless you can actually execute on that idea, there's no way that you're going to be successful. And you talked about a partner, and I think that sometimes that's really important. If you have an idea that somebody, if you're the idea guy or the content guy, that there's somebody that's out there that helps you along with that other part of things. And I think you learned that a lot in the Navy. I think that's a great example of learning how to do business.
I just want to add on to what my colleagues have said. I think the important thing in life is not just IQ, which is a product of nature, or even EQ, which is nurture. I think the most important thing is DQ. And to me, DQ stands for desperation quotient. How desperate are you to succeed? When I was in school, I came from a very, very poor family. There was no means for my parents to give me enough money to go to school. So I actually ran a small little stall, not far from here, called StreetSine Road, which used to be known as a Thieves Market. So if you drive a car, you lose your hubcap, you go to the Thieves Market, you go to a diggy store, you ask for a hubcap, and off the old man goes, he comes back with a hubcap, you pay a smaller fee, you go back to your car, you happily put a hubcap on the left-hand side, you go to the right-hand side, the hubcap is missing. Not everybody's a thieves, but I need to work there because I need to succeed. And my next turnaround was when I was in the corporate world. I'm sure most of you in this room works in perfect company for perfect bosses. Not for me. There came to a point where I was very, very tired of all the corporate politicking. I do not want to see where the winds are blowing. I do not want to see the temperature of the company and the modes of my bosses. So I was very desperate that I need to go out there and make something out of my life. And so for me, I think it's important to have an environment where people would accept failures.
Yeah.
But for me, it's not a question. I want to be an entrepreneur not because I'm concerned about failure. I want to be an entrepreneur because I'm desperate to succeed. And I think there's a world of difference between the two. Whether you are there as an entrepreneur because you're worried of failure, or you're desperately in need to succeed. And why I say that is because I think at the end of the day, entrepreneurship must be something that comes within you. And I hate the term entrepreneurship because I think the traditional, classical definition of entrepreneurship has a lot to do with the business world. Therefore, if you're not in the business world, therefore you don't have to be an entrepreneur. I want to just redefine the word and probably even throw away the word and say the definition of entrepreneur to me is to be able to capitalize on ever-growing opportunities with ever less resources. And why do we do that? So that we can make the world a better home. So in other words, with this new definition, you can be an entrepreneur whether you're in the business world, whether you're in the Navy, whether you're working for a government, whether you're in the charity circle or you're working in a university. All of us should be entrepreneur. I mean, I know there is a new term called entrepreneurship. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do and what we're all trying to achieve is to make this world a better home.
Thanks. Mike, you see a lot of entrepreneurs and you work with a lot of entrepreneurs and you decide, week in, week out, whether to invest with entrepreneurs. What do you look for in that analysis?
A lot. I think certainly it's all about people on the team and trying to gauge these characteristics and market and opportunity and all of these you think about. But maybe stepping back even, you asked about risk. It's interesting that none of us as entrepreneurs commented on risk. Patrick talked a little bit about failure and avoiding it. But usually when somebody says entrepreneur, the response is, well, what about the risk? And I always look around and I see people that are in these huge risky situations, very career risky. I look at friends that are in big companies and I look at the risk of them staying in the same job forever, the risk of them doing meaningless work, or the risk of them working long and hard to get almost no pay increase, whatever the metric is. The risk that people take is just tremendous. And when I think about entrepreneurs, I think, wow, I think I'm a very risk-averse person. I'm not risky as an entrepreneur. I couldn't handle the risk that all those people take. And so one of the things that I think you have to think about when you think about entrepreneurship is, how do you define risk? What does that really mean? And when we look at entrepreneurs or companies that come in and we invest in them, we look and think, well, how do they think about risk? And how do they define success? How do they define failure? Are they coachable in that process? And if you think about risk, I think in the way that maybe is traditionally thought about, it's probably not an entrepreneur that we would look to fund. We certainly look for people that are very risk averse. I mean, they want to build a business successfully with very, very few resources, cost effectively. But risk for them is not about failure. It's not about avoiding failure. It's about creating value. And what can they do to create value? And on the resourcing side, we certainly look for entrepreneurs that don't work within boundaries. Good entrepreneurs, I think especially in Singapore, is a great place for this. But the view is everybody works for you. And your job is about enrollment. How do they work for you, but they don't know about it yet. You may not be paying them, but never mind. How do you get them enrolled in the mission that you have? And people that can do that, I guess you'd call that leadership, but the ability to get people involved in creating value along with you, that's a tremendous trait. And that's what you have to do as an entrepreneur. And I think fundamentally that's a very big difference between being an entrepreneurial company and a large established company. I think I worked for Texas Instruments, a large company, for a long time. It's a very different problem. Lead a big business, go into a new initiative. Okay, you're doing new things and you're innovating, of course. But I should have no excuse to fail. If I fail, they should fire me because I have infinite resources. As long as I convince the organization to go forward with something, I have all the people, I have all the money, if I want to buy a company, whatever it takes, I can solve the problem. It's tough to convince the company to resource that. It's no small problem, big problem, but it's a different problem. In a small company, there's no question what I need to do. That's not the hard part. The strategy isn't a hard part. You can think about these things. The hard part is, how do I get the resources to get it done? And that's about enrollment. That's about getting people involved. Whether that's money, people, resources, government, whatever it is that drives it forward. So when we're looking for entrepreneurs and companies to fund, it's that ability to use these resources in a way that creates value and do that for a lot less money, a lot less support than you would have